Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio. So today, we need to be taking a look at the very best expansion we ever got in Sun and Moon. You see, ladies and gentlemen, the Sun and Moon era is over. The Sword and Shield era is beginning when the first set comes out next month. So it's time that we went and had a look and went, right, we had 12 expansions. That was quite a bit of the Sword and Shield trading card game. So what were the best ones? Now, I did do my Pokemon TCG Awards 2019, and I did give an award to the best set that came out in 2019. And the best expansion I actually gave to Unbroken Bonds. And there were a bunch of reasons for this, but it really largely came down to stuff like Welder, which really transformed the format, to Dene GX that gave us extra speed and consistency, things of that nature. That's not to say there weren't other good cards, but they were probably the highlights. Oh, and Triple Acceleration Energy, actually. That was pretty big. But you see, I don't think that is the best set that we ever got in the Pokemon trading card game. And I don't think it was the best Sun and Moon set. And I'm not going to leave you in suspense. I'm giving it to Guardians Rising. You see, when this was being revealed, I was at the Pokemon Casters Conference, or Summit, or whatever you want to call it, over in Seattle. And I was sitting around with Joe and Nick and David and all those lovely people. And we recorded a little episode of the podcast, and we were talking about the best cards from Guardians Rising. And even after we'd all had a go, even after we'd all picked one standout card from the set, there was still, like, flat-out broken cards that no one had actually picked. This made our decks consistent, and every single deck had multiple cards from Guardians Rising. It kind of had to. I mean, for my money, there were 5 absolute full-on staple cards in Guardians Rising. First of all, and most famously, we had Tapu Lele. Tapu Lele, when you played it from your hand to your bench, let you search a supporter card and put it into your hand. It was the same ability that Jirachi EX had years ago, back in Plasma Blast. But the thing is, it also had a really nice attack for 2 colorless energy that did 20 damage for each energy attached to both active Pokemon. Though it didn't hit for weakness, which stopped it being a little bit silly like the old Mewtwo EX, which had the same attack, did hit for weakness, and led to the Mewtwo Wars. A low retreat cost of 1, a decent amount of HP, no weakness, but just being able to search at your supporters put this in almost every deck. And when Shaman EX rotated, we didn't really miss it that much, because by that point, an awful lot of decks had moved over to Tapu Lele anyway. But it also brought us Rescue Stretcher. Rescue Stretcher either let you take 1 Pokemon from your discard pile and put it in your hand, or take 3 Pokemon from your discard pile and shuffle them into your deck. It was phenomenal Pokemon recovery. You could either get 1 Pokemon right now and play it, or you could go and get 3 Pokemon right back into your deck, and it was an item card. And it was a staple in basically every deck for recovering your Pokemon. We got Choice Band. Now, I got a little bit of grief on Choice Band. When I started talking about it initially, some people had mistranslated it so it only worked on non-EX, non-GX Pokemon, which would make it extremely similar to the old Silver Bangles, so you can see where they were coming from. But no, it wasn't as restrictive. It just did 30 more to EX or GX Pokemon, regardless of what it was attached to. And it let you hit the numbers. And it was in pretty much every deck. Sometimes you would be against a whole bunch of non-EX, non-GX decks and you'd know you were going to be, and at that stage you wouldn't actually play it, but those, ladies and gentlemen, were the very rare exceptions. 99% of your games, this came in and was incredibly useful. Okay, that's an exaggeration, but come on. It was in every deck and it was absolutely huge. We had Field Blower, which was the best tool removal we'd had since Startling Megaphone. And even in the expanded format where Startling Megaphone was still legal, Field Blower largely replaced it. Now, Startling Megaphone gets rid of all Pokemon tools on all of your opponent's Pokemon, which sounds better. But Field Blower can get rid of your own tools, and it can get rid of stadiums. There are a bunch of games like Transformers and Destiny where you can just replace upgrades, as they're called in those games. You can just put a new upgrade on Pokemon tool. And in Keyforge, you can just attach as many as you like to one character. Well, in Pokemon, it's one per Pokemon, and you can't just discard them. You can't just replace them. Well, you don't need to, ladies and gentlemen, because this allowed you to get rid of it. It was absolutely huge. It was gigantic. And since we lost it, there are a whole bunch of cards like the Fairy Charms. Well, you can't just get rid of it and attack anymore. All of a sudden, you can't attack that fairy Pokemon. Something like Spell Tag. When you KO a Psychic Pokemon with Spell Tag, they get to drop 4 damage counters. What you would try and do is Field Blower right before you took the KO, but you can't anymore because you don't have Field Blower. It was redonkulous, ladies and gentlemen. Absolutely redonkulous. And I said 5, but I meant 4. Tapu Lele, Rescue Stretcher, Choice Band, Field Blower. All 4 of those cards appeared in the majority of decks for the entire time that they were legal. But we also had a whole bunch of other really useful cards that popped up in a whole bunch of really good decks. We got Max Potion. And yeah, Max Potion was a reprint. But we don't have Max Potion nowadays, ladies and gentlemen. Max Potion isn't a thing. And Max Potion's huge. Whether you're using it in an Aromatisse deck to move all your energy around, Max Potion to move the energy back, or you're using it as we did in Gardevoir decks, where you would just attach 1 or 2 energy, hit for less damage but keep Max Potioning, using your GX attack to recover them, or whether you were using big tag team Pokemon like Magikarp and Wailord that your opponent could not one-hit KO, so you just Max Potioned, or indeed just Wailord EX and expanded. Make no mistake about it, Max Potion made a lot of decks viable that would otherwise not have been viable. Water decks got a huge boost from both Aqua Patch and Brooklet Hill, although Brooklet Hill let you search out basic water or fighting Pokemon. But being able to search out your basic Pokemon using a stadium, and then being able to attach extra energy to the bench ones using item cards, it gave such a ridiculous gigantic boost, so now every single water deck, and to a lesser extent fighting decks, was significantly better and more viable because of these 2 cards. We saw the combination of Energy Lotto and Energy Recycler, which really did help us out in terms of our energy. Energy Recycler let us take 5 basic energy and shuffle them back into your deck. Energy Lotto let you look at the top 7 cards of your deck, find an energy card and put it into your hand. And yeah, okay, it didn't guarantee that you got the energy, but nothing did, especially when you wanted special energy. This was the best thing that we had. This was our best option. We had a reprint of Enhanced Hammer, which was great at getting rid of special energy, and we still had Crushing Hammer in the format as well, which basically meant we could just get rid of all of our opponent's energy. It made energy denial decks a million times better. And we actually got Mallow. Now, Mallow gets a specific mention here because Zoroark might not have been in Guardians Rising, but Zoroark absolutely ruled the format for the entire time that it was legal. Zoroark was huge, and Zoroark had an ability whereby you discarded 1 card from your hand and then drew 2 cards. Mallow was a lovely supporter card that let you search your deck for any 2 cards and put them on the top of your deck. You see where we're going with this? Mallow combined with Zoroark was a fantastic combo that a lot of decks used absolutely frivolously. It was good. Now, there were some decks that came around entirely because of Guardians Rising, and at least initially, the most stark, the most blunt of these was Garbodor. Garbodor, for 1 psychic energy, did 20 damage for each item card in your opponent's discard pile. And this instantly transformed the format. Now, I told you that I was in Seattle when this set was being leaked, and released even. Well, I think about a week or so after I was in Seattle, the set was legal. Or at least a couple weeks, shortly after. And at that Seattle Regional Championships, 24 of the top 32, 75%, and 6 of the top 8, 75%, were Garbodor decks. Now, this never happened again, alright? We never again had quite the domination from Garbodor, But I sincerely believe that the reason that happened was because we all started making our decks a little bit differently. We didn't start relying so much on cards like Trainer's Mail, because Trainer's Mail meant we were playing a greater number of item cards. We all had to think a little bit more about how we built our decks. And Garboda's only good when you're playing a bunch of item cards. And Garboda never really went away, and Garboda is still one of the very, very best decks in the expanded format. I believe I gave it my expanded deck of the year in my awards. I'll link the awards in the description. It's phenomenal. And it was phenomenal with Drampa, which also was in Guardians Rising. That was one of the big builds for it. It was phenomenal with Espeon GX. And actually Espeon EX in the same deck. It was phenomenal with Zoroark. You could basically play it with whatever you wanted. Golisopod Garboda, that was a pretty good deck for quite a while. It was one of the most impactful cards we've really seen in years, though it didn't really last. Now, Lycanroc GX, it wasn't the first Lycanroc GX we got. We got the midday form as a promo. It saw a little bit of play as a fun little energy denial deck. But Lycanroc GX Midnight form came in Guardians Rising, and this was huge. It had an amazing ability. When you evolved up into it, you got to drag a Pokemon active. It had a decent attack, but it also had Dangerous Rogue GX that did 50 damage for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon, and that added up very, very quickly. Lycanroc was great. It saw play with Buzzwole GX, it also saw play with Zoroark, what didn't? But there were many different ways to play it. It really was one of the very best decks, again, pretty much for the entire time that it was legal. Now, we also had Metagross GX in Guardians Rising. Metagross GX was, well, it was a weird one. It was a very weird kind of deck. It was a very straightforward, this is what I'm doing kind of deck. It had an ability that accelerated Psychic or Metal Energy to itself, and an attack that did 150, and a GX attack to search your deck for any 5 cards. And it absolutely destroyed Gardevoir decks. But it had some really rough matchups. Now, anything that couldn't one-hit KO it, this was another wonderful use for Max Potion, because you could essentially retreat, Max Potion, redo the energy and all of that with the ability. It was a really fun deck. But it was a very weird one in that it was extremely, extremely linear. And of course, we got Sylveon GX. Sylveon GX, great little Pokemon. Of course, we still had the Energy Evolution Eevee. It came out in the previous expansion Sun and Moon, the base set. You attach a Fairy Energy, search your deck for a Sylveon, evolve it up, job's a good un, and then you just use Magical Ribbon to search for any free cards, like the aforementioned Crushing Hammer and Enhanced Hammer, that can be used to wreck your opponent's energy. Yeah, that was a really good deck for a long time. Did also show up in Gardevoir an awful lot, but it didn't necessarily need to. Now, they were the real key new decks and the super useful cards, but there were a bunch of other Pokemon that were really, really good as well. We saw Turtonator GX come in, which had, I mean, it was just a really fun Pokemon, to be honest with you. It had a really nice attack, Bright Flame, 160 for free energy, discard 2. Shell Trap for 2 energy, did 20 damage, but if your opponent attacked your next turn, they took 8 damage counters. And it had a GX attack that accelerated 5 energy. You could play it as a Turtonator deck when you were allowed to play stuff like Blacksmith, or you could just put it as kind of a one-off in Volcanion decks, largely for the GX attack to accelerate energy. It was a Pokemon that came around a lot. Alolan Ninetales actually won the Pokemon Trading Card Game World Championships, albeit in the senior division. You obviously had stuff like Aqua Patch, which helped immensely, but you also did 160 and discarded 2 energy. Or for 2 energy, you did 50 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Or you had the frankly horrible GX attack Ice Path that moved all damage counters from this Pokemon to your opponent's active. Now, the crucial thing here was it moved it didn't swap, which means your opponent took all of your damage counters, but you didn't have to take all of theirs. And there was a great combo here with a non-GX that came around in Burning Shadows. It was, frankly, a little bit silly. It was awesome. We saw Tapu Koko GX coming out. Like Tapu Lele, it had no weakness. It had a lovely ability that moved energy over to it. It could do 130 for free energy, great against non-GXs. Or for free energy, it could do 50 damage for each energy attached to all of your opponent's Pokemon. That added up extremely quickly, ladies and gentlemen. Extremely quickly. But it did have a retreat cost of 2 when the Tapu Koko promo that was released around the same time had a retreat cost of 0. That doesn't seem to fit, quite frankly. We had the Sudowoodo that limited your opponent's bench to 4 Pokemon. Still sees a lot of play in Expanded to take out Zoroark and Mega Rayquaza decks. We saw the Mimikyu that came along and let you copy your opponent's attack, as long as, of course, it was an AGX attack, which has been teched into a bunch of decks since, whether they're Malamar decks, or even Metagross decks, to be fair, which can accelerate psychic energy. We saw the Delmise that let all of your metal Pokemon do an extra 10 damage, which sounds weird if you don't play the Pokemon video games, but makes absolute perfect sense if you do. We saw the Sensu Oricorio coming out, the one that for each Pokemon in your opponent's discard pile let you drop 1 damage counter on their Pokemon. This was a phenomenal counter to Night March decks, but it was also a pretty good counter against Vileplume decks. Remember, of course, that Combee only actually has 40 HP. Then again, Joltik only has 30 HP, so that's even worse. We also saw Wailord coming in, breaking the HP record for a non-GX, coming in with a ridiculous, phenomenal, almost over-the-top 200 HP. I believe the current record is actually Wailord with 220. Yeah, he broke his own record in Celestial Storm. Although, to be fair, as soon as you take 5 damage counters, you do no damage, so, still good as a blocker. Make no mistake about it, Guardians Rising had a phenomenal impact on the Pokemon trading card game, and it had a phenomenal impact when it rotated out, because we lost all of these cards. But I tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, I remember when this set was coming out, and oh my goodness did it help. We had a lot of new Pokemon that could go into decks as techs, we had a lot of new decks, and we had a bunch of cards that were in every deck for the entire duration of this set's legality. This was a phenomenal set that changed the game. And for me, I did sit down, I did look through all 12 expansions, I did my research, I did my due diligence. But when I sat down to think about what the best Sun and Moon expansion set was, I did rather suspect it was going to be Guardians Rising, and would you believe it, it ended up being Guardians Rising. So there we go. But I want to know what you think. Do you agree with Guardians Rising? If not, tell me which one you'd rather I put at the top. And do you have any memories of Guardians Rising? Tell me what your favourite cards were. Go nuts in the comment section, but please remember the rule. Be nice, would ya? And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And please do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassyPlays, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all kinds of good stuff. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.